picky, but it's
Right.
better than entering the
It is
code
well,
in Notepad or TextPad or something like that.
when I say picky, I mean like when I'm trying to open a file on there. Sometimes I can't find it, so I have to.
All right, so today we're going to be doing a review of arrays, or if you haven't seen arrays before in Java, then it'll not be a review. But this is an add-on to the other lectures that we already have of the book. You know, it's just going to be, try to summarize what we need directly, all meat, no fluff. So there are two ways of allocating arrays, and I don't even think the book mentions this way in Java. And I may mistakenly type it like this because that's from C and C++. And the developers of Java decided to make it support the C, C++ syntax. But this is the correct way. That's the correct way of doing it, where you give a data type, like int or string or something, and then you use the square braces to indicate that it's an array and not a single variable, and then you give a variable name, like this. Int, but it's an array of ints, scores, like that. String, but this is Java, so string needs to be capitalized. And just to make sure you know that those are square braces, I'm putting a space between them. Names, something like that. Now, if you've done Python, you're used to the idea that you can allocate a list as you declare the variable. And as a matter of fact, that's usually what you do, right? You usually do something like this, right? Colors, this is Python now. Colors is equal to, and then you use the square brackets and you list some things like, right. A couple of differences between Python and Java. It's not really a difference. Python does not support the idea of arrays directly. It supports lists. Lists are like the superpowered cousin of arrays. Arrays have a limit, which is that once you declare a size for the array, it's fixed in length. If you decide that you're only going to have 10 scores in there, and so you dictate that there's going to be 10 ints in that array, too bad if you want to add an 11th, right? Too bad if you decide you want to delete a couple and make it an array of length 8 instead. A list, you can do that, right? You can add to it, you can delete from the middle, you can do all sorts of stuff and it will resize. Arrays do not resize. Lists do. There is a data type that supports the Python functionality of lists. It's called array list. So let's go ahead and make a comment that arrays are fixed in length, do not resize. Array lists do resize. This lecture is all about arrays. Python uses lists, not arrays. So we're not going to talk much about Python anymore. We can duplicate this functionality, though. That's the Python way of doing a list and pre-filling it with data, right? We can do it in Java. String, square brackets because it is an array and you don't have to put the space there. Colors equals, and then you don't use the square braces, we use the curly braces. Python kind of deviated from the standard there because curly braces is well, I guess since it's not an array, it's something else. They can choose whatever they want. In this language, and in C and C++, you use the curly braces. And then you could put in, right, red, comma, green, comma, blue. And if you're familiar with the idea of the Oxford comma, which is that the comma should go inside the quote rather than outside it, no, not in this language, not in any programming language. You do it like that, right? You put the commas between the elements. That is a good way of allocating an array and filling it with data with what's known as an initializer list. The PowerPoint may call it something slightly different.
That's how you do it in Java.
That's how you do it in Java, right. I'm going to comment this out to indicate that we wouldn't even do it in that way. If you're not going to pre-fill it with data, you need to use the new keyword to create your array. Something like this. Double space weights, except I forgot to specify that it's an array, so I need to go back and add my square braces. And I should switch over to doing this in NetBeans, so I'm not going to make y'all do this as a Dropbox. Anyways, double square brace weights is equal to new double, and then you have to say how many you want. Now we have an array that can hold 100 different doubles. And yeah, let's switch over to doing NetBeans. I goofed. I told it not to create the default directory. Let's try that one more time. At least one person when installing it was installing NetBeans, got into a state where they could not create new Java applications and they had to enable plugins. It was pretty weird. Alright, so file, new project, arrays, demo. Alright, so in here, I'm just going to declare one array called nums. Kind of lame. Int, square braces, nums, equals, and I'm going to type in some nums inside the curly braces. Let me make the font a little bit larger than that if I can. So inside the initializer list, I'm going to type in some numbers. Jenny's phone number, 8, 6, 7, 5, 3, 0, 9. There we go. Close curly brace, end with a semicolon. There, we're good to go. What if we want to copy those values into a new array? Int, and this is going to be a really primitive way of doing it. It's not how you would actually do it. So int, square brackets, nums2 equals new, and that's a phone number, so it's 7 digits long. New int square 7 in square semicolon. Now we have a second array, and we could put those numbers into it, right? So nums2 subscript 0 is equal to an 8. Nums2 subscript 1 is equal to a 7 or 6. I'm trying to just copy these numbers here. Nums2 subscript 2 is equal to a 5, 8, or 6, 7, 8, 6, 7. I should have chosen something else. All right, there we go, like that. And I could keep going, right, to the 5309. Notice that the array starts counting at 0. So element 0, element 1, called the index number. Index 0, index 1, index 2. So that's 0, 1, 2, 0, 1, 2. Let's print out that array. In Python, you did something like this. For x in nums2, right, and then you did print x. It's actually just as easy in Java, but you're not going to always want to do it that way. That's called a for each loop, or a range-based for loop. I forget which one the textbook calls it. So for, parentheses, int, I'm going to use v, or the word value. For int value, and instead of using the word in, we use a colon. Nums2. So for parentheses int value, colon, nums2, in parentheses. The way we read this is for each value in the nums2 array, system.out.println, parentheses, quote. For now, let's not even put anything in there. Let's print out the value. Right. And so that's going to print out 867, and then it's going to print out 4 zeros. Because I made the array 7 elements long, right? But I only put in 3 numbers, so the rest of them get filled with zeros.
So we do the semicolon, or in the for statement, the colon, instead of using, is it because it's an array that we're using S to the end?
It's just because that's the Java syntax.
It's just a job.
Right. That's how it would look in Java, but, excuse me, that's how it would look in Python, but in this language we have to have a parentheses, we have to have our colon there. And, yeah, like that. And then C# follows a slightly different syntax, which I like, which is actually using the word for each value, you know. Now that's an error, actually. Why is it an error? Oh, I think I deleted it. There. Because we have to specify what type of data the array is holding. We can tell that you figure it out by putting the word auto there. Nope, I'm wrong. I was sure there was a way to do that. Nah. All right. Sorry, I was thinking C++ and C# there. Okay, so this is how you reference each element of an array. This is one way of printing them out. Another way is by index, right? This is doing it by value, but we can also do it by index. So we're going to create an index variable. I'm just going to call it I. For, parentheses, int, I equals 0, semicolon. I is less than, and I could make it 7, but that's really lame. Instead, I would want to ask the array how many elements there are, because what if I go in and make it, you know, a 10-digit phone number? What if I put in the area code? But I'm going to leave it like that for now, and then I'm going to come back and fix that. And then I++. And then system.out.println. Instead of printing out I, because that would just print out 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, we need to print out nums2 subscript I in subscript, end parentheses, semicolon. That's going to give us the exact same output. It's going to print out the first 3 numbers followed by 4 zeros.
You want to have the brackets on the for statement?
Did I forget something? Pardon me?
You don't have the brackets on the for statement, on the curly brackets?
Ah, good point, good point. Do I have to have the braces there? And the answer is no. I should do that, though. But if you only have one line of code, it's okay to leave the braces off. Sometimes when I'm typing in code, I'll forget them. I'll leave them off because I know I only want one line of code, but it's actually kind of poor programming. I usually recommend doing that so that if you came back in and you added a second line of code, you'd know right where to do it. Yeah. I should do that because you Python programmers are used to the idea that you could put in, you know, a second line of code here, right? System.out.println, you know, something else, whatever. And that both of these would be subordinate to the for statement, but actually only the first one is, unless I use the curly braces, right? It would treat it just like it was like that. So in order to get that to work correctly, I would need to do that. So good point, good point. Let's run it and see. And there we go. It printed out 867 followed by, you know, 4 zeros. And once you know the syntax for a for loop, you know how to do all sorts of things. You want to sum up every value in the array. It's easy to do. Declare a variable called sum. I'm going to store my sum in a double rather than an int, even though we're adding up integers. Double sum equals 0. Now I'm going to do this one the right way. I'm not going to hard code the 7. Instead, I'm going to ask the array how long it is. For, parentheses, int, I is equal to 0. I is less than, the name of the array is nums2, so nums2 dot length, semicolon, I++. You can see that the for each syntax is a lot simpler, right? So as a general rule of thumb, I would do it that way. The only time that you have to do it this way is if you're going to be changing the values in the array. Because this is a copy of the value, right? It copies that 8 into the value, and then the 6 into the value, and then the 7 into the value. There's no way to actually change the array as we're stepping through it if we're using a for each loop. Yeah. This way we have the index numbers so we could change them. If we wanted to add 1 to every value in the array, we could do that, right? We could do nums2 subscript I equals nums2 subscript I times 3, right? We're multiplying every number times 10, something like that, right? We can change the value. This code would not work up here. I'm going to comment that. Well, I guess I'll leave it just to prove that it works. No, I'm not. I'm going to comment that out. Okay. But down here, instead of printing it out, we're going to add it to the sum. So sum plus equals nums2 subscript I. Then say you wanted to calculate the average. Well, the average is just a sum divided by the length of the array, by the number of the elements in the array. Double average equals sum divided by nums2 dot length. Like that. And we may as well print it out. System.out.println, parentheses, quote, average equals end quote plus average. I think I will add some more comments. For each loops are great because the syntax is so clear and simple, like Python. But if you need to change the values of the array as you step through it, you have to use an index-based loop. So to create an array, this is assuming you've already declared the array somewhere else. You've declared the variable, but you haven't allocated it, right? Otherwise, you would put data type followed by the subscripts, the square brackets, array ref variable. This is the key point of that. This is we're creating a new variable of a specified size. So here's the full example. It's harder to see because we're not using int or string or double or anything like that, but we know what data type means. You can create an array of any data type, right? It doesn't just have to be ints, floats, and doubles. You can create your own data type and then create an array of that. Alternately, you can create arrays by creating an initializer list. Once you have an array, if it's of 7, you can only access elements 0 through 6, right? They start at 0 and they go to the length of the array minus 1. So people call this the array reference variable. It refers to an array. This actually creates the array, but the array can't be accessed unless it's stored in a reference variable. Processing arrays. Here we declare an array called myList, and it's got 4 doubles in it. We print them out. We're doing it with an index-based for loop. They're using I rather than the word index. Maybe I started doing that, I don't recall. And then system.out.println I. Summing all the elements. They use the word total rather than sum. Finding the largest element. We could do that. What we would want to do is set the largest element equal to the first element in the array, and then we keep checking. Is this successive value equal, or is it larger? And we keep stepping through it until we find the largest one. Let's do that. Int largest equals, I'm going to go back to our original nums list. Nah, I keep using nums too. So int largest equals nums subscript 2 subscript 0. Int largest equals nums 2 subscript 0. And then for parentheses int value colon nums 2 for every value in nums 2 curly brace. If parentheses value is greater than the largest, then that becomes our new largest. If value is greater than largest equals value, like that. Then we can print it out. If we were checking for the smallest, right, we would just use a less than. And of course, we'd change that variable name. Right, if our current value is smaller than our current smallest, then set smallest equal to value. Now, if we run it on this, what's the smallest value in our array? It'll be 0 because the zeros count. Now, if you want to copy one array into the other, there's like a short way, and there's a better way, and then there's another way still. No, I shouldn't say that. There's a long way, then there's a better way, and then there's a better way still. Let's do the long way. To copy an array item by item, you would do an index-based array. So now I'm going to copy nums into nums2 so I get the rest of the phone number. So for int I equals 0, semicolon, I is less than nums dot length, semicolon, I plus plus. Parentheses. Now nums2 subscript I equals nums subscript I. Nums2 subscript I equals nums subscript I. That copies the array. I may as well put a comment out to that effect. Copy nums array into nums2 array. That's the long way to do it. Notice it's giving me a little warning out here.
How does that copy it into it?
Because it copies element 0 of the old one into the new one, and then it increments I, and it copies element 1 of the old one into the new one, and so on, all the way out to the last. Just like if I had done this. That would be the same as doing this. Nums2 subscript 0, don't type this, is equal to nums subscript 0, and then repeating that 6 more times, right?
Yeah,
Et cetera, et cetera.
You're using dot length because you know exactly how many is on there.
Right. This asks the array to tell me the size, because if I went up here and I changed this, I added, Jenny lives in area code 405. If it was hard coded to 7, then it would only copy 7 characters, right? But if I put a 7 here, then it would no longer be correct. Yeah. So when you copy an array, you really should allocate a brand new array of the same length. So I'm going to do that. Before here, I'm going to make a new array, nums2 equals new int square nums.length n square n semicolon. Right, now why would I do that? Because I want to make absolutely sure that my new array is of the same length, right? You saw me go and change the size, the length, the number of items in the nums array, and at that point nums2 did not have the same number of elements. Because if you recall, I set this one specifically to 7. I'm going to go ahead and change that back, but this is the correct way to copy an array. So what happened to our old data? We had some data. We had, we had 7 ints allocated out somewhere, and now nothing is pointing to them. Nothing is referencing them. That's when the garbage collector, it's actually what they call it, kicks in. And Python's the same way. It has a garbage collector as well. And if you have data that's allocated but no variable points to it anymore, it releases that memory, which is a good thing. Because if you had a loop that allocated memory and never released it, you'd have what was known as a memory leak. And languages like C++ and C can definitely have memory leaks unless you specifically free up the memory as you do it. So we've created a new array to hold those values. The old data is floating out in outer space with nothing referencing them. That's called orphaned data, right? There's nothing pointing to it anymore. So now we have a second array. But we have a little comment out here. It's saying that's a manual array copy. Dude, you did it the hard way. Replace with system.arrayCopy. Okay, so you could use system.arrayCopy and it does it in a single line of code. And there's another way of doing that too. I'm going to copy that, undo it, and put this as alternate syntax. So you see here the way I got it to do the cleaner syntax is I clicked replace with system.arrayCopy. What this is saying is copy from that array starting at position 0 into this array starting at position 0 and then doing it out to 7 or however long the length is. So you could do funny tricks like you could copy from array element 10, from one array into array element 0 of the other array and only do 3 items or something like that, right? You could copy partial chunks, but you'd have to make sure you weren't going past the end of the array. So there's another syntax still, which is the arrays class. Arrays dot copy of and I don't even know what it's asking for there. What does largest mean? I better highlight this and look up the Java doc. So I'm going to right click on that and do show Java doc. Control F, look up for copy of. Now that says new length, not largest. So can we leave it off? Can I just do this? Nums2 equals arrays.copy of nums. Do I have to specify a length? Be cool if I didn't. Nope, it wants me to specify the length. So nums.length, like that. Is there any reason to use one over the other? This one's a slightly cleaner syntax, right? Just a little bit shorter because we're not specifying the starting point inside each array. Otherwise, there's no reason to prefer one over the other. I wouldn't write that except on, on an exam. I probably ask you to write some code that will copy from one to the other. Although, if I say using a loop, I'd want you to go ahead and do it that way. But if I don't say using a loop, you could use one of those two methods. Honestly, I'm not expecting you to memorize those syntaxes. I just want you to know that there are other ways of doing it. And that's the way that you would see it in the professional world. Because there's no reason to write a loop like that if you have the code to do it. Oh, and check this out. It's also offering a comment. The assigned value is never used. Well, that's true, right? We copied some data into a new variable, but we never used it. So for each loops, we've demonstrated this one. For every element, for double element in my list, because my list is an array of doubles, print out element. Passing arrays to method. You can pass an array to a method just like you can pass any other variable or reference type. Let's declare a method that prints out the array. So I'm going to put a comment here that this is the end of class, that this is the end of main, and I'm going to create a new method. Since main is a static method, this method has to be static as well. It doesn't need to return anything, so I'm going to declare it as void, and I'm going to call it print array, and it's going to take an array of ints. Int subscript, int square, int square, array, like that. Close brace, close parentheses, open brace, close brace. Then I can print that out however I like. In C++, you cannot use a range-based for loop inside of a method, but here we can. So for int v for value, colon, array, in parentheses, open brace, system.out.print. Changing this up a little bit. Print v, but I'm not making it print line. It's not going to the next line each time. But we should print a space out. So v plus a space. And then after it's done printing out the entire line, right, it's not going to the next line each time. System.out.println just to get it to go to the next line. And now I'm going to print out nums2. So I'm going to come up here inside of main, which is the client for my print array method. And I'm going to call print array, and I'm going to pass in nums2. Now when I run it, there we get it, 8675309. Is there an easier way of printing out an array like that rather than doing all of that? Well, there might be an arrays to string method. Let's see if there is. Because look what happens if you just do system.out.println nums2. It doesn't give us anything we like. In Python, that worked beautifully. Excuse me, nums2. Here, just prints out a reference, hash memory address for it. Doesn't do us any good. But I'm thinking that there may be a way to convert that to a string. Let's see if arrays.toString parentheses nums2 close parentheses close parentheses. Let's see if that makes it look prettier. Yeah, it prints it just like Python did. Open brace, close brace, all the items, clearly delimited by commas. That's nice output, right? But you need to know how to do this. If I ask you to print it with a loop, go ahead and do it with a for loop. If you're just printing it out in your own program and that's how you feel like doing it, if I didn't tell you otherwise, then you can do that. So print the array out in a quick fashion, do it like that, and then print the array with a loop. And you could use an index-based loop as well, right, because we're not changing the values. So we could have done I is equal to 0, I is less than length, I plus plus, print out array subscript I. Is it possible for this thing to change the value of the array? Absolutely. We could be resetting all the variables to 0 as we step through it. Right? If we felt like it, we could change the first item and be mischievous. I'm probably going to get rid of this. But array subscript 0 is equal to 1,000, right? There, we've changed the first element in the array. That's totally legal. However, we cannot change the reference. I can't do this. Array is equal to new int subscript, 100 in subscript. It's not a syntax error, but it doesn't change the reference. If we get back to here after this executes, nums2 still equals 8675309. It's not pointing to a new one. So we can change the values that the array references. Remember, this is a reference variable. It's pointing out to memory, but we can't change the reference itself and have it take effect. Just like useless, because you can't change the reference variable itself, only what it points to. Python was the same way. This is not new. So static void test, we're going to take an array in. I'm just going to call it AR. So parentheses, int, squares, AR into parentheses, and I'm going to say AR is equal to new array subscript 3. Excuse me, new int subscript 3. And then AR subscript 0 is equal to a 999. If I come back up here and I print out, if I first call test and then I print out the array, it's going to print out the same original data. It's not going to have any new effect whatsoever because we created a new reference. It's pointing out to different memory, but this variable actually does not change. The value of it does not change. The data that it points to can change, but the value does not. So if I do this test and I pass in nums2 and then I do print array nums2, this is a useless change. It doesn't do anything. It's still going to print 8675309. Yep. But if I take this out so that it's still pointing to the same space, it's still pointing to the same memory that we knew about up here, then it works. It's on 999. So this doesn't change the original value in any way. This changes the first element of the array referenced by the AR variable. Hope that makes sense. Just like if you did this, one more example, int xyz is equal to 3, and then you wrote a method that was supposed to try to change the value of it, static void change, parentheses, v for variable, in parentheses, and you set xyz here equal to 4. If you print out the value of xyz, it's still going to be 3. Oops, that was supposed to be v. And it's not because the variable is named anything different. If I went up here and I named that one v, it's just because Java is what's known as pass by copy or pass by value. 3 fills in this variable. It's not the same variable. It's a copy of the variable. So any changes to it does not affect the original v. So returning an array from a method. If I did need to allocate a new array and pass it back, this is the right way to do it. Declare your array and pass it and return it. So I'm going to make a method that returns an array. Static, but it's not going to be void because it's returning a new one. Int. Now let's change things up. Let's make it an array of strings. Static string sub square in square get colors, parentheses in parentheses, open brace. Now let's declare an array of colors. String square, in square. Doesn't matter what we call it, SA for string array, or the names don't matter except to us. Equals, curly brace, red, end quote, blue, end quote, green. Kind of got those backwards from tradition where it's RGB. And now we're going to return SA, like that. We create a new array and we pass back the reference to it. Pass back the pointer to the address of that array. So if we want to, string colors is equal to get colors. That works perfectly. And if we printed the array out, oh, I've made a mistake. What's the mistake I did there? Colors is just a string. It's not an array. How do I change that colors variable to actually be an array?
SA?
Yeah, I need the braces there. Now I could print it out and it would work. System.out.println, parentheses, arrays.toString, parentheses, colors, end parentheses, semicolon, like that. And so it should print out red, blue, green. So if your function needs to pass back a brand new array, you have to return it. If you merely want to change some values in it, like that, sure, go right ahead. Make it a void function. Feel free to change the values. There's nothing wrong with returning AR and then making it return, be an array of that type, but it's kind of frippery. I don't see any reason to do that. So there's the arrays class. It's got methods like binary search, but you can only do a binary search if the data is sorted. You can compare two arrays with the dot equals method. You could fill the array. Want to set them all equal to the value of 999, you could do that. You could sort the array. That array that contained red, blue, and green, let's sort those colors before we print them out. So I'm going to come up here, and after the call to get colors, colors.sort, parentheses in parentheses. That didn't do it. Colors dot, I guess it's arrays dot sort. Colors equals arrays dot sort, parentheses, colors, like that. And still give me grief. All right, fine, like that. Arrays dot sort, parentheses, colors, in parentheses. Now when we print it out, it'll print blue, green, red. Yep, blue, green, red. Alrighty, that's about the end. And by the way, I just grabbed this information from a place called Tutorials Point. So I'm going to post a link to this in D2L.
What's it called again? Tutorials what?
Tutorials Point. Tutorialspoint.com. Let me get a link to that. So if you want a super short but super good page of information on arrays, go here. All right. Any questions?
No, really. That makes sense.
All right, cool deal. All righty. Until the next time,